This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Well, Real Talkers, the budget has dropped. You know that. The most engaged talk audience in the country, as if I need to tell you. Alberta staring down a tough news budget. That's what Shauna Feth told us in our most recent episode. The CEO of the Alberta Chambers of Commerce said that this is going to be a tough one. She was keeping an eye on what the government was going to do, savings versus spending. And now we know the Alberta government has provided a heads up, I suppose, warned Albertans that they're going to be staring down about a $9.5 billion deficit in year one. And if oil prices don't improve, Alberta's fiscal outlook won't either. People across the country are keeping an eye on this. Volatile oil revenues for the province, increased spending, and a softer than expected energy price outlook. This volatility matters, and it's factoring in. And I'm sure that that's what our guests in this Alberta budget feature episode are going to hone in on. There's a lot of money going to healthcare, a record $34.4 billion. There's new and increased fees. There's no sales tax. Did you think there might be? I'm not sure this government would roll one out, but perhaps, at least anecdotally, more and more Albertans feel like that might be the answer to helping this province get back on track. In just a moment, we'll talk to the leader of Alberta's official opposition, and then in partnership with the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, we'll present a Real Talk roundtable, and we'll be getting to emails and live chat comments from you. Laura has one locked and loaded. She has a degree in economics. She has a degree in political science, and she has a couple of things that she wants everybody to be thinking about. And of course, there's some Alberta budget content in today's edition of The Flamethrower, proudly presented by our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. That's how we'll wrap this episode. Let's get the ball rolling. Want to let you know the show happens with the presenting sponsorship from RapidX Financial. You can find them online at rapidxfinancial.com. You've seen this Canadian company's ATMs, those rapid cash ATMs across the country for 25 years now. Well, as the crypto world has become more and more relevant and certainly moves fast, you know your trust in an exchange can't be a gamble, and that's why we're proud to partner with RapidX Financial. They make it easy to get started with 3 different ways to trade. They've got the physical crypto ATMs. They have an over-the-counter desk for folks like me who could use a little human guidance, or maybe you're making a discrete or larger value trade. And then, of course, the secure, easy-to-use online platform where there's a special offer for you because you're hearing about this on the show. If you go to rapidxfinancial.com and use the promo code Ryan50, all one word, Ryan50, they're going to take 50% off fees on all your online Interac e-transfer trades. RapidX is secure. It's FinTrack registered, which is a huge deal. And critically, it's non-custodial, meaning you always control your keys. If you know crypto, you know how important that is. It's Real Talk and Real Bitcoin at rapidxfinancial.com. Make sure you use the promo code Ryan50. Alberta's official opposition leader. He's the leader of Alberta's NDP, Naheed Nenshi, joining me in studio. You smirked when I said no sales tax in this budget. I don't think anybody was expecting that there would be one, but I guess that would be one way to solve a resource or a non-renewable resource-related deficit that seems to be a recurring story here in the province of Alberta. If you were premier, would you consider, or would you task your finance minister with considering a sales tax to help Alberta get on track?
Well, the law says that one can only do that in Alberta with a referendum. Referenda. But Albertans have pretty much said that that's not something they're interested in. But I would not look at Albertans and say, I want to increase your taxes in any way until I could convince them and myself that we're spending their current taxes well. And, every opposition will always say, well, if we're elected, we're going to get rid of the waste, we're going to get rid of the fraud. But the amount of waste, fraud, corruption in this government is like nothing I've ever seen before. So we have to, first of all, make sure that we're spending the money well. So my big headline, I have 2 big headlines for this budget. The first is so much spending and so little to show for it. And the second is this government has done something unique in the roller coaster of Alberta politics. They managed to waste the boom during the boom. Because this is the thing. Oil production is at record highs. Oil royalties are almost at the record. I think there's only been 2 years that have had higher oil royalties than this year. And Danielle Smith, for example, is dealing with 6 times the royalty revenue that Rachel Notley dealt with. And she still can't balance the budget. Her deficits are still higher than Notley's deficits. And meanwhile, 7 years of UCP government, not one critical care bed built in Alberta in 7 years. They built fewer than 70 schools when Notley built or renovated 240 schools in 4 years. In 7 years, they built fewer than 70. So what are they doing with all the money? I think that Albertans are absolutely legitimately allowed to ask that question. So let's look at healthcare for a second, right? In healthcare, there are now, by my count, 11 new agencies replacing AHS. 11. Each of which have their own CEO, their own management structure, the whole thing. And yesterday we saw the setup. It's already started, but we saw the official setup of something called Shared Services Alberta. We asked the bureaucrats, what are the total costs of Shared Services Alberta? What are the startup costs of it? And Shared Services Alberta is just trying to get all the other agencies working together, which they were working together before because they were all one agency. They couldn't tell us, and they said, we're not sure we will ever be able to tell you because all of the budgets are hidden within the other 4 ministries. That's crazy talk. I've seen reporting this morning that Shared Services Alberta alone is almost $3 billion. So where is all this money going, and why is it not going to the front lines? So, Ryan, we've had this conversation before. Ever since I became a New Democrat, people say to me, Naheed, we know that New Democrats are good on education. We know they're good on healthcare. We know they're good on the services we need. But the Conservatives are good with our money. Well, these Conservatives are lousy with money. And the fact that the minister actually said the only way he could balance the budget this year was to close all the schools just tells you how bad they are with money.
I want to follow up. You say waste, fraud, and corruption. Waste, you've kind of detailed one example where you think that that's happening. Where do you think that there's fraud occurring?
Well, the corrupt care scandal is just the tip of the iceberg. So, we know that in that scandal, which is so freaking hard to explain, but we know that someone deeply connected to the UCP, the cousin of the Minister of Justice's wife and the Minister of Justice's best bro, has received, despite having no previous experience in healthcare, despite having bankruptcies and lawsuits against him, and despite having a criminal record, came out of nowhere and somehow got maybe more than $1 billion in government contracts. We know that there's $100 million on Turkish Tylenol that randomly went through the same guy. And so when we look at all of that, we have to say, where there's smoke, there's fire. There's never just one. And we hear rumors all the time of this kind of thing going on in other ministries, in procurements, and we got to get to the bottom of this. And the government has never agreed to have a public inquiry on the corrupt care scandal. The only reason a government would refuse to have a public inquiry is if they have something to hide.
Let's talk about forecasted oil prices. Emma Graney's done great reporting on this at the Globe and Mail. I'll reference her reporting here. The budget estimates cash from non-renewable resources will reach just over $13 billion in the 26-27 fiscal year. That's almost 20% of the province's total revenues, which is massive.
Yes.
It's also nearly $9 billion less than the sector brought in during the 24-25 fiscal year, $3 billion less than the province had previously forecast. What do you make about where this budget pegs the price of oil over the next couple of years? It's forecasted quite a bit higher than the banks and industry experts have.
They're probably right for this year. And, to give them a little bit of credit, I think that differential between the WTI and the WCS is certainly wider than most people thought it would be. The Trans Mountain Pipeline was supposed to shrink that more than it probably has. But that said, for next year, they are pegging a forecast of $66 WTI, and most forecasters are saying about $60. And that's really weird because typically what governments will do is they'll lowball the estimate so they have some fiscal room, and then at the end of the year they can say, hey, we did better than we thought. For them to actually come in so much higher than forecasters means that next year's deficit will almost certainly be much higher than they're forecasting. And let's remember one thing. It's a technical thing, but I think it's important. This government passed a law that makes this budget illegal. It's illegal in two ways. The deficit is twice what it's allowed to be under the government's own law, and you're not allowed to run more than 3 deficits in a row. And there's no path to balance in this budget. So they are looking at deficits for at least the next 4 years and every year after that. So it doesn't really matter. The government can change the law, and they will. The finance minister has already said he's going to amend his own law. But it just goes to say they went into the election in 23. They told Albertans, we're fiscally responsible, and look, we're going to put these guardrails so you can see how good we are. And within the lifetime of one government, they violated it. The other thing that will happen within the lifetime of one government is that this government will double Alberta's debt in one government. In 4 years of Danielle Smith, we will double Alberta's debt. That's pretty shocking. And when you think about the fact that debt servicing right now in our budget takes up more than mental health and addiction, environment, and public safety combined, and that's going to double, it means less and less money available to spend on the things that actually make life better for people.
Realistically, you would be in the same position as Premier, though, right? When it came to running deficits. Do you think there's any way you could put a budget out right now without running a deficit?
There's probably, there's a question of the scope and size as well. And certainly if that WTI-WCS differential was so much larger than forecasted for, then that is going to screw up your books. That is absolutely true. But the thing is, this government has made very poor choices. They blame everything on immigration now. That's the latest thing to blame things on. But they also blame it on low oil prices. They blame things on everything that's out of their control. But the government's made a lot of choices that have done this as well. In fact, this is all the results of bad choices. I'll give you a simple one. How's everyone enjoying that bag of chips tax rebate from last year? Bag of chips a day. They did that because they just did it for no reason. And the finance minister himself said, we can't afford it. And the premier made him do it anyway. So these are all choices that have been made. The choice to restructure healthcare and spend untold billions of dollars there. Would that close a $9 billion deficit gap? Probably not. But could it cut it in half? Could it cut it by more than half? It probably could. And that puts us in a much better position to be able to recover going forward.
Alberta's Finance Minister Nate Horner spoke ahead of the budget's release about making cuts and about some of those tough choices. I wanted to put in front of you and get your take on what he had to say. It's pretty candid.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I was actually
he's been remarkably candid.
I was impressed with what he said.
I keep saying
the
poor guy looks like he swallowed a fish.
What does that even mean?
It just feels like he's nauseated at what he has to do and what he has to say, because it's very clear that the Premier's office is calling the shots here.
Okay. Well, here's Alberta's Finance Minister Nate Horner.
To understand, to put some context around this and understand, where this is at. I could start at the smallest ministry in government. I could start with Executive Council and cut all the way up to the health ministry's education and maybe advanced education. Get rid of everything else in government. That would balance the budget. Or I could completely cut K-12 education. And I might have enough money left over to make homeschooling very robust. But that's what we're talking about here, how dramatic this is.
Does that resonate with the average Albertan?
But listen, that's crazy. That's crazy. How can you as a finance minister preside over 7 years of government? Now, he's been finance minister for 3 or 4 now. I think this is his 4th budget, maybe 3rd. But how can you preside over a government where you can say something like that a few dollars less in the price of oil means you got to close all the schools? That tells you that these people are exceptionally bad with money and exceptionally bad with planning and budgeting, because you've heard me say this before, Ryan. The thing that shocks me about this government is I've never seen a government before that doesn't really care about governing, that cares about scoring political points day after day, about their own political survival, but not the nuts and bolts of actually running a government. And, and I will tell you, I have a lot of sympathy for Nate Horner. He's an old school PC type. He comes from a political family that's done a lot of great service in Alberta, but he is working for this premier. And at some point, he's got to wake up and look in the mirror and say, what am I doing here? How can I possibly do my job when I'm getting all this? The other really telling thing about him, and sometimes I joke going, does the premier know he's actually telling the truth? So, for example, the premier, as we all know, has been going on and on blaming everything on immigrants. The budget documents themselves clearly show that there were only 2 years in which our immigration was higher than historical averages. In those 2 years, Danielle Smith was the premier, and in those 2 years, she was saying, we need Alberta to be 10 million people. We need Red Deer to be 1 million people. We need people to come here. They ran the Alberta is Calling campaign. They're still paying people $5,000 to come here. And now that's done. Like, the growth has finished. The population growth projected for next year is 1%, which is half of historical average. But they're blaming everything on immigrants. But the finance minister isn't. And he never says the word Trudeau, which is interesting. He actually says, look, a lot of people came here because it's really affordable here. And if we mess up the affordability, people won't come here anymore, which is the opposite of what his premier is saying. So even within their caucus, they seem to have no idea what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't know if any serious person takes blaming Justin Trudeau seriously anymore.
Are you saying the premier is not a serious person? Because she does it every day.
I'm just saying I just don't consider it to be a serious strategy. I think that the average person sees right through it. I think that the average Albertan, the average Canadian, anyway, whatever. I'm not going to waste my time preaching to the choir to you, but the average Albertan is well aware that Alberta got what it asked for, which is an influx of people to come live here and work here. We lobbied the feds for more immigration, and now that we got it, I guess the suggestion is we didn't get the type of immigrants that we wanted, and it's hurting the province. That's the implication.
It's a garbage thing to say, right? What really happened was we spent all this time telling people it's affordable here, there's great jobs here, but the government was not actually supporting the creation of jobs or the creation of the economy. Unemployment is up significantly since Danielle Smith became premier. But Ryan, probably not for today, but I will come on anytime over the next 10 months, which are going to be awful, to talk about just how dangerous all this anti-immigrant rhetoric is and how dangerous it is to the economy and to society's fabric and how reckless the premier is in doing all of this. Because you can say what you just said, but there is a lot of people who hear a very different story when the premier is out there. And, you know, David Shepherd yesterday, you should play this. He did a beautiful member statement in the House in which he talked about his friend and mine, John Cornish. John is the greatest Canadian football player. I will say that to his face.
Legendary Stampeder, right? Yeah.
Big black guy, super handsome big black guy. And he was accosted on the street saying, go back to your effing country. A week before that, he and his wife were in their favorite restaurant in Calgary. John went to the washroom and someone walked up to his wife and said, I hope ICE takes you. That can happen to John Cornish. Imagine what's happening to the person who's working at the Tim Hortons. And that's the kind of thing that the premier is making happen here.
I don't want to just move on from that.
No, sorry.
No, I mean, it's powerful stuff, and it's important that stuff's said on the record, and I appreciate it. Back to the budget. What do you think is the single biggest risk in this budget?
Well, every premier since Peter Naheed has attempted to reduce our reliance on royalties to balance the budget. Danielle Smith's first budget was the first one in probably 30 to 40 years, maybe 40 years, that increased our reliance on royalties. So as you said, royalties are now some 20% of our revenues. And so having that incredible piece there is a real problem. The other problem is that the much vaunted capital spending isn't in this budget. So for weeks now, the Minister of Hospitals is saying his solution to overcrowding in hospitals is to build 3 new bed towers, essentially 3 new hospitals, at Misericordia, Grey Nuns here in Edmonton, and at the South Health Campus in Calgary. So in this budget, there is $0 for the South Health Campus in Calgary. So Calgary, that added 100,000 people per year, hasn't had a single hospital bed built, and there's nothing budgeted for the next 3 years. And for the Misericordia and the Grey Nuns in Edmonton, there's just pre-planning money. Few $1 million. So that's a long ways off. They renamed their school accelerator program to Schools Now. I call it Schools Never, because there's not $1 in the next 3 years for a construction of any school that's not already under construction. And Schools Now is actually not going to build 200,000 spaces until 2032. So if you're a Fleetwood Mac fan, you know that the famous line, children get older. So if the huge growth in immigration is done, and we're going to go back to more reasonable levels going forward, then by the time those classroom spaces are built, those children will have finished school. So this is just a failure to plan over and over and over again, and people are not going to be able to see this in their real lives while they find themselves paying way more in property taxes, paying way more in fees, and just not seeing any benefit for it.
The property tax angle is a big one. I want to hand things over here to your successor, the current mayor of Calgary, Jeremy Farkas. I think with a reality check for Calgarians, it'll be relevant to Albertans everywhere on what property taxes are doing and exactly where the money's going and the tough spot that municipalities are in right now. Here's Calgary's mayor.
We're getting very close, perilously close, to half of every property tax dollar being collected in the city of Calgary going to the provincial government to fund provincial priorities without a very clear line of sight in terms of whether that's being invested back here in the city of Calgary. So it bears a bigger and a deeper transparency question. Most Calgarians, they'll open up their property tax bills. They will assume that most, if not all of the money that is going off of their monthly debits, if they're in the installment plan or in their yearly payments, they're going to assume that money is going to the city for city priorities. But right now we are on track for at least 40-60, if not 50-50 in the coming years. So a big focus of ours is to be able to demonstrate to Calgarians that we are doing our part and calling on the province to do theirs.
It's trying to get ahead of something. It's trying to get ahead of the sticker shock. It's damage control in a way. I think most people are aware that municipalities can't run deficits. Are the cities getting a raw deal here?
Oh, absolutely. Now, I'm laughing because I have a technical, nerdy problem with one thing he said.
Go for it.
Which I would never, ever talk about except to your audience.
Thank you, Naheed.
Which is quite simply that his framing around the 50-50, it always was 50-50. And in fact, it was when I was mayor that ratio started changing. So that's not a shocking thing. That is such a tiny quibble with what he's actually saying, which is very, very true. The reason they're doing this, so Nate Horner admitted it was because they were trying to embarrass the cities in the past by not increasing their property taxes. And the provincial take on the property taxes, in Horner's opinion, is too low. But the real reason they do it is because they can blame the mayors, because they don't have to take responsibility for it. So even last year with the bag of chips tax cut, they actually increased property taxes by more than the bag of chips tax cut, and they went on and on about how they cut taxes. It was ridiculous, but they knew that even though when I was mayor, we changed the property tax bill to say this is for the province. And last year, Mayor Gondek put out a flyer showing very clearly how much went to the province and how much went to the city with your property tax bill. People don't read those things. And when they have to write a check to the city, they assume it's the mayor's taking all that money, and that's why the province does it.
I mentioned earlier we spoke with Alberta Chambers CEO Shauna Feth yesterday. She talked about savings versus spending and the different ways that governments can send messages to entrepreneurs and risk takers. This budget essentially halts, at least temporarily, contributions to the Heritage Savings Trust Fund. Would an NDP government restore contributions to the Heritage Savings Trust Fund?
Yeah, but you have to do so in a responsible manner. So what the strange thing about this situation is, even in the House as recently as yesterday, day before yesterday, the Premier was saying our Heritage Trust Fund program is how we're going to get off the roller coaster by putting more and more into the trust fund. But this budget shows no contributions to the trust fund for the next 3 years at least. So the other question is, should we be taking the interest out of the fund to fund operations? And I would argue no. The fund, like your RSP, needs to be able to grow itself, and it needs to be replenished with contributions when you can afford it. And the math is really simple here. If you're earning more in the fund than it's costing you to borrow money, then you should invest in the fund. And right now, I think that it was the right thing to let the interest stay in the fund where it can earn more money and take a higher deficit on this end as we're growing the fund. But you got to figure out a way to make up for decades of mismanagement of that fund if you really want it to be helpful in helping us balance the budget at times in the far future where we have no oil royalties.
Was there anything on the separation file or anything in that context that where you drew a parallel or saw an implication in the budget? Does the dialogue or perhaps the spending referendum around Alberta's separation reflect itself in the budget in any way in any of this government's priorities?
It's almost like there's two parallel governments going on. There's the Premier and Rob Anderson and Mickey Amory doing their thing, and then there's the poor finance minister trying to run a government. And those are quite different things. But there's one very basic thing. All these referenda, that's going to be $50 million of taxpayer money plus untold amounts of people having to donate and run campaigns and so on. It's money that's being taken out of productive use in the economy. And these are all distractions, but they're expensive distractions. The Premier doesn't want us talking about healthcare. The Premier, and even on Monday, we asked for an emergency debate on healthcare, and the UCP turned it down and took the afternoon off instead. So they don't want us talking about healthcare. They don't want us talking about education. They want us talking about immigrants. They want us talking about separation. They want us talking about these referenda. And at the end of the day, this costs us money when the government takes their eye off the ball.
Before we're out of time, I want to ask you about some, I called it a media mutiny yesterday
it was kind
on the
of funny,
show.
right?
Yeah, well, and I'm curious to see how you'll respond to this because, you're used to your critics coming out with, guns blazing against you, but some progressive writers have kind of taken aim at you this week. I don't know if you saw Max Fawcett's piece in National Observer says Naheed Nenshi needs to step up or step down.
Thanks, Max.
Which is a pretty, right? That's a pretty major headline. Dave Cournoyer, typically, I don't know if he'd mind me saying this, but typically friendly to the NDP, has pointed out that Raki Pencholi, he says, has taken the lead. Don Braid is wondering where your star power went. How's this landing with you?
I'm just laughing. Listen,
you're not laughing.
I actually
this.
kind of am, because progressives, I call us Eeyores sometimes. We're always looking for the negative side of life, right? But here's the thing. We decided after the Premier announced that she was going to make this video statement that we would treat it a bit like a U.S. State of the Union. So rather than the leader responding in the State of the Union, they usually use it as an opportunity to highlight the team and highlight stars in the team. And I have so many stars in my team. And one of the brightest ones is Raki, who did such a great job. And so progressives, instead of celebrating that the deputy leader is so awesome and we've got a deep bench, we're like, is she putting a knife into Naheed's back? So I asked her, hey, Raki, are you putting a knife into my back? And she said, and then what would I do? I am so...
Well, people think she would run for the leadership.
Right?
That's what she would do.
But that's her point, right? She's like, no, I was the chair of your campaign, right? And I love the team. And I'll tell you, Ryan, I was worried, right? Because I'm an outsider when I came in to take over this party. These people don't know me very well, and I come from a very different background and maybe a slightly different philosophy than a lot of them. But I know that the Premier spends a ton of time trying to unite the United Conservative Party, and I don't spend any time doing it because I've got these 38 brilliant people who have very different backgrounds, very different philosophies, but we are all rowing in the same direction. So you're going to see even more of this, and I hope it doesn't freak out Max and Dave too much, but I want to highlight Jody Callahoo Stonehouse. I want to highlight Diana Batten. I want to highlight these brilliant people, Cord Ellingson, who we've got, to really, so people can see it's not just me, it's a real team all around me. And at the end of the day, look, we had a record quarter of fundraising in Q4. Despite the Conservatives changing the laws to benefit them, we actually out-fundraised them in Q4. And you and I always talk about how polls don't matter when there's no election. It doesn't help you to win a random Tuesday in February. You have to win on election day. But I will tell you that I have seen 9 polls from different agencies for different organizations over the course of the last 2 months. And I'll tell you what they said. 3 of them said we would cream the UCP in an election, especially in Calgary. 3 of them said the UCP would cream us, and 3 of them said it would be a tie. So,
But I will say, it's not, the Raki thing was remarkable. This audience knows that's where she said, cut the bullshit, call an election. The video went viral.
Yeah. Well, let's just say I don't like to swear, but I know she does. So I was like, hey, Raki, could you say...
I'll quote her for you on your behalf. But
I actually said cut the BS, call an election, and that was the lead on the CBC this morning.
It wouldn't have gone viral if you said BS. She needed to say bullshit. But aside from maybe Dave's piece where he says Raki takes the lead, the focus isn't necessarily on the fact that Raki got a lot of attention for the video. Max, for example, I'll quote him in National Observer, says the Smith government poised to run a string of multi-billion-dollar deficits. He says responsible for an ever-expanding ethical scandal. He says yet the UCP still the favorite, maybe a heavy one, to win the next election. He says why the answer is NDP leader Naheed Nenshi. He says it's likely that you are sleepwalking the party into defeat. It has nothing to do with Raki's video.
Well, he's welcome to say that, but the first part of his sentence is wrong because, of course, they're not the heavy favorites to win an election. The polls are all over the map, and only a third of them say they would win. The other 2/3 say it's either a tie, which means we win because our vote is more effective, or that we're going to cream them. So who knows? But we're fundraising, we're nominating candidates. Our very first nomination happens on Tuesday. It's going to be a hard-fought nomination in Edmonton-Glenora. No, it's not. Sarah Hoffman is already there. But we're doing great. We're ready for an election, and the UCP are not. So, Max, talk to me the day after the election.
I do have to ask you then, point blank, are you considering stepping down?
Oh, yeah, I'm leaving today, Ryan. I'm announcing it right now. A year in with no election, raising more money than any NDP leader has ever raised. I'm stepping down.
Okay,
no,
so
I mean,
you're
that's
not going
ridiculous,
anywhere.
Right? That's ridiculous.
Okay.
Because we're doing a great job. We're getting out in parts of Alberta we've never been in before, getting into the hearts and minds of people. I'll give you a little preview of something else. People across Alberta are furious about the abandoned well issue, about the surface rights issue. I'm sure you've talked about that a lot on the show. And last week, a crusty rancher stood up in front of a bunch of old crusty ranchers and said, I've donated to the UCP. I've never not voted Conservative. It's time for us all to vote New Democrat.
Sasky James, we'll make this the last question. It's not a question. It's a challenge from Sasky James.
Ready, Sasky.
He's donated $28 to our Super Chat to ensure that I read you this. He says, it's time for you to quit playing it safe and take a stand, endorse Heather McPherson for the federal NDP leadership, and call out Avi Lewis. Sasky James says, make it very clear that the Alberta NDP will have nothing to do with the LEAP Manifesto cliff jumpers.
The Alberta NDP will have nothing to do with the LEAP Manifesto cliff jumpers. I can't be more clear than that. I'm not a member of the federal party because, as you know, last year the membership of the Alberta Party chose to make federal membership optional. And so I'm not voting in that election. I got nothing to say about it, but I will tell you that I've spoken to all of the leading candidates and I made it extremely clear that they are not to make it harder for us here in Alberta, and that the time for... we already have a government that plays university debating club ideology. We don't need that from the New Democrats. And we need to be able to show Albertans that we're a government in waiting and will be a great government in waiting. And I've made it very clear to all of the leaders that that is the case. I do think it's funny that two of the three leadership frontrunners have basically made "we will help Naheed more than hurt him" the centerpiece of their campaigns.
Thanks for doing this. Thanks for making yourself available in studio. We appreciate it.
Always happy to do it, Ryan.
That's the leader of Alberta's official opposition, Naheed Nenshi, in our feature interview presented by Mercedes-Benz Edmonton West. In just a moment, a Real Talk Roundtable in partnership with the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. But first, while we've got your attention on matters of budget and wealth accumulation, longer-term planning, let me direct you to North Road Investment Council. If you're the one in your family, your business, your nonprofit organization that is in charge of ensuring that you're set up for future success, you owe it to yourself to check in with the team at North Road Investment Council, a steady hand and a studied voice to guide you through wealth and investing. You can find online the brief but very effective explanations of what they do and how it's different from anybody else in the space. North Road's Edmonton-based team works with discerning families, foundations, associations across the country with strategic approaches to wealth management that aligns with your vision. Plus, they join us once a month here on the show. Carrie Williams, just a few episodes ago, talking about how AI is disrupting, well, basically everything and what the investment implications are. You can find that, of course, wherever you get your podcasts or in our Real Talk YouTube archive. And consider scheduling a meeting with North Road Investment Council today. Perhaps it's just a second look that you could use. Maybe you've got an investment advisor right now. Maybe it's self-directed in your organization or your household. The team at North Road can work on an hourly basis to provide that second set of eyes. And if you let them know you heard about it on Real Talk, they'll offer a discounted rate. That's North Road Investment Council online at northroadic.com. For those of you considering a career in financial management or maybe a career in politics, could be a career in social services or anything else, Athabasca University, as Canada's open university, is bound to have a fit for you with hundreds of world-class accredited online degrees and courses designed so you can complete your education wherever and whenever it works for you. That means if you need to take some time off to look after your parents or look after your kids or travel or for a mental health break, it's no problem. And if you're a real go-getter that wants to complete an undergrad in 2 or 3 years instead of 4, you can do that too. Open your options with the online offerings at Athabasca University. Get started today by visiting athabascau.ca. Hey friends, I consider this my duty every single month to remind you that the first day of every month, Friesen Brothers at their 16 locations across the province knock 15% off grocery purchases of $75 or more. That's an incredible way to get your family's dollars stretched as far as they can. The first of the month coming up again next few days, depending on when you're listening to this. You can find out details at friesen.com. That's FRESON.com, or visit them in one of 16 different Alberta locations. Friesen Brothers is proudly Alberta grown and Alberta owned. And if you are listening to this show, shout out to everybody who's joining us on our live stream right now. Shout out to you guys. And of course, those of you who will catch the podcast as soon as it drops. If you don't have plans tonight, that's Friday, the 27th of February, and you're anywhere near the Metro Edmonton region, I want to encourage you to swing on by Atrium at Sabor, a beautiful new hospitality venue by that Sabor family. Boy, did they ever nail it. Tonight is Heartbeat Hideaway in support of the C.K. Huey Heart Center at the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation. This is an evening of cocktails, light bites, mixing and mingling, all in support of this incredibly innovative and integral institution that is the C.K. Huey Heart Center. We were lucky enough just a few episodes ago to check in with their chief of cardiology, Dr. Ben Terrell, who blew our minds with the work that they're doing there, the innovation that happens every single day and impacts Canadians living in many different provinces and territories. This is an incredibly important healthcare hub, and without your support, that innovation cannot continue. Consider joining us at Heartbeat Hideaway for the C.K. Huey tonight. You can get your tickets by following the link at royalalex.org or check out heartbeathideaway.ca. Well, what a pleasure to welcome to the program three movers and shakers. Doug Griffiths, our good pal, president and CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce, but of course, formerly a cabinet minister as well here in the province of Alberta. So he'll come at budget talks from a couple of different directions, different approaches. Alim Somji is joining us from Jaffer Group. Alim, it's wonderful to have you here. And Bianca Parsons with the Alberta Food Processors Association. To the three of you, welcome to this Real Talk Roundtable. It's nice to have you here. I want to encourage you to speak freely, jump in on one another, share anecdotes, whatever you think will best convey what you make of this budget that's just dropped about 18 hours ago. Why don't we start with you, former cabinet minister, now the CEO of the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. If you were writing the headline, Naheed Nenshi gave us his two headlines. What would yours be?
Well, I guess the headline would probably be some important investments made, but beware the long-term deficit and the challenges that we're facing.
Okay, well, why don't you take us into that? Because a lot of people are going, a $9.4 billion deficit, Alberta's debt continuing to rise. This wasn't supposed to happen under a conservative government. The flip side of that is that oil's not where it needs to be. Maybe Alberta's economy isn't as diversified as it needs to be. I'll ask that as a question, not a statement. What other option did they have? So how do you sort out what's real?
Yeah, well, that's part of the challenge. I mean, I had said when I was in politics before that one of the biggest challenges we have as a province is that we have this structural situation. Most people don't want anything cut. They say, cut the budget, but not the stuff that's important to me. And the budget, frankly, 2/3 of it is made up by advanced education, and healthcare. And we're short. We need to invest more in healthcare, more in education, because we spend, I think we're probably near the bottom in the entire country on a per capita spending basis. But the issue is then we have to rely on oil and gas. But then we're going to have these fluctuations where we suddenly are flush with cash, and then we have these massive deficits. And until we fix the structural issue, we have this is a reality that we're going to have to deal with.
Alim, Jaffer Group, you guys are big in hospitality, buildings, real estate development. Maybe you can give us kind of a quick sense of how you approach budget analysis, what you were looking for in this budget, and ultimately what you take away from it.
I think for us, strictly speaking, we have property downtown, so I was looking for at least some indication that the provincial government was serious about safety and vibrancy in downtown Edmonton. given that it drives so much of certainly the local economy, but public perception from the outside of what Edmonton is like. And I was hoping to understand a little bit better what the long-term plan for housing was, and specifically affordable housing, given that we certainly have a need in Edmonton, and there are wraparound services that come with affordable housing, that come with supportive housing, that come with transitioning people to better circumstances that the affordable housing bucket doesn't solve. We can put somebody in a house, but unless we're willing and able to spend the money and the time to provide the skills and develop those individuals to a point where they can be long-term out of a situation, we're not really getting anywhere. And so this budget kind of felt a little bit incomplete over a number of ways.
Have you had are you a big group chat guy? Do you have a bunch of friends, colleagues working in the same industry that were texting each other back and forth the afternoon, the evening after budget went out? Is there a common consensus with people that work in the space?
I mean, for better or worse, I'm surrounded by physicians in my life, so certainly the group chat was a little bit different. But I think there's certainly a wait and see approach, and I think for outside of the physicians, for the teachers that we know, money is there, and what is that going to look like? How is that going to impact the day-to-day operations of our healthcare facilities, our schools? That's kind of been the biggest thing, and I would say that this government is not necessarily the best at being clear and transparent in how they plan to do these things. It's one thing to promise a lot of money and to throw money at different things, but there's not necessarily the long-term planning that comes with a lot of these things. And I think this budget shows a lot of that too.
Bianca, I love that we have you here on the panel. I think people will be very intrigued. Oh, what would the Alberta Food Processors Association be looking for in a budget like this? You and I have spoken off camera several times about the scope of your role, and I know you're often in Ottawa. You spend a lot of time talking to federal lawmakers. When it comes to the provincial budget and in representing your membership, what were you looking for in this budget, and ultimately what did you take away from it?
I would say our members are very split. So you have the Alberta Food Processors. They also have a lot of beverage companies in there, a lot of small businesses, a lot of companies that are very similar that are members of also of Doug's here. And when you look at it, there's two sides, right? You're an employer, first and foremost. So you care about what matters to your workforce. What matters to workforce is usually security, safety, whether that means safety at your home or whether that means safety for your family. So that then comes in education, and it then comes in hospitals and healthcare and all that. So I think the employers are happy because their workforce is happy in that aspect. But then as an employer, how do you grow? I was just saying offline before we got on here today, is that there's two sides of it. I look at other provinces right now, and when I look at my group chat, it's with a lot of people in other provinces, and they're like, oh, wow, your GDP to net, so the debt to GDP ratios, Alberta's now looking at about 8.7%. We're the lowest in Canada still. So you have BC, 25%, Quebec, 86%, Ontario, 84%. So what that says to me is when you're a business owner, that my husband and I also are, when you go out there, are you saying, okay, I want more? Or are you terrified for your children and saying, oh my goodness, I don't want my debt to hit that high, that I'm passing on a business that is now going to contribute to this huge debt that my child's going to inherit in the future to have to pay back. So I think as processors, we're two sides of it. We're a lot of small businesses here. We're the largest employer for all of manufacturing in Canada. So we have a lot of staff. We want our staff to be happy, but we also kind of get jealous if I go back and look at Ontario and BC and say, you get what kind of grants? I want that. But then when we talk about these GDP ratios, you're like, wait a minute, I don't know if I want that kind of debt.
Interesting, and I appreciate the scope of your answer, and that there's a whole bunch of different angles. This is what budget analysis I think requires, which is going. Sometimes you rob from Peter to pay Paul, or sometimes you make a concession here to make an investment there. I also have to ask you though, on the employment side, there's been a lot of talk about immigration in Alberta. It's going to be on the referendum. The Premier's talking a lot about it recently. Mr. Nenshi just talked about it. When it comes to temporary foreign workers, when it comes to the available workforce, how is that impacting your members?
TFW is an extreme source topic for me. It is less than 1% of our Canadian workforce.
Wow.
We are using the word TFW incorrectly, or the phrase incorrectly all the time. There's a massive difference between a student visa, between a temporary visa, and a temporary foreign worker visa. So I would love to say to listeners out there, let's drop TFWs. Let's give them a break. They are used in agriculture correctly, especially in our province. They are used properly. It allows us to have incredible food. It gets those grains to the table. Let's stop talking about TFW and let's more talk about, people that are coming here to be part of our workforce for a reason. And I did see in the budget opportunities to have those TFWs become residents. So we're kind of talking out of both sides of our mouth here, right? So let's have them become residents. Let's have them continue to do the incredible work that they're doing. But less than 1% of our workforce, that's not a problem.
Are your members typically able to find workers when they need them?
Yeah, mostly, especially in core centers like Edmonton. We have the largest apiary in all of Canada. That's in Guy, Alberta. That's a problem. In Guy, Alberta, it's a little bit tricky probably when you're just outside of the oil sands to find workers. But that's just outside of Peace River for everyone to know in their geography. Tiny little hamlet. Where is it and what does it have to offer? But the great thing about Guy, Alberta is that they're trying to create these wonderful opportunities for temporary foreign workers to do just that. Come in, work the bees, leave, and help us create some incredible food.
Did you say it's the largest apiary in Canada?
Yeah, it's right here in Canada,
right
here in Alberta.
Oh,
We're honey producers, honey.
There you go.
Well, there's in other businesses, there's still this challenge because we have a high unemployment rate is matching the type of workers we need for the industry that's looking for workers. And that's still a pretty common problem. I do applaud Minister Horner for the element in this budget that's investing in our post-secondaries to get the training to align with the skills and the trades that we need. That is a strategic investment that I think is pretty important for our economy. And as we continue to grow, though, I think we're still going to need to attract new people from across the country and across the world to help support Alberta's growing economy. So I don't think that the immigration issue is actually a problem. And I don't know that, my guess would be I don't think the government necessarily believes that either because it's another month before it's been 2 years since they demanded that we doubled the amount of immigration coming to Alberta from the federal government. Demanded that we had, 10,000 of the Ukrainian refugees come to Alberta. We know that we need more people to match our economic growth, and we know we need to continue to invest in post-secondary to train them to make sure that they're ready for the demands of our economy. I don't think that any of this budget issue has anything to do with immigration. It has to do with the oil and gas that we're so heavily reliant on.
And I might add, 2 years ago, we absolutely, it wasn't wrong. We absolutely needed more people. For a long time in this province, we've needed more people. There were a lot of open jobs. And, I don't doubt that we'll get back to that as the province grows. And if we do become more prosperous, there will be a requirement for more people. Stopping immigration is not the answer. Not the answer to anyone's problems.
Yeah, like Dov referenced, here's the Premier in her own words just about 2 years ago.
We know it's going to be a tough one. That's
we'll get to it in just a second. That Danielle Smith clip is what we'll bring to you in just a quick second. Let me ask you, Alim, from a capital markets perspective, how would you assess that Alberta is perceived right now? Like, people will be curious to know if this budget has improved confidence among investors or potential investors.
I think from an overall perspective, I think people are still looking at Alberta, from across Canada, are still looking at Alberta as a good place to invest from a real estate perspective. This particular budget and this particular government has not solved the one problem that they've created is, if Alberta may not be a part of Canada anymore, what does that look like for investment? And, I have to say, from this particular budget, I was hoping that there would be a clear answer to that question and the Premier would take a clear stand on how she feels. But that hasn't been the case. And until we can put that to bed permanently, it's always going to be at the back of an investor's mind. Where am I investing? What does that look like long term? If I'm making a 20 or 30 year commitment, how sure am I that that's going to continue to be viable? How sure am I that my bank is not going to walk away if it at some point no longer becomes a part of Canadian portfolio? We don't know.
Can I add on to that?
Of course.
Our Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has been on the road constantly working on new international trade deals, given the tariff situation with the United States. I think a dozen new deals have been signed, new markets opening up, new opportunities for trade. And if other countries are looking to invest, they're probably going to look at other provinces than the uncertainty that's going on with Alberta right now. And so we're sitting on the cusp of this amazing opportunity, being the best province to invest in, talking about separation at a time when that investment will look around and go, maybe Ontario's better, maybe Saskatchewan's better. And this is the very definition of cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Is it impacting food processors as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think when we talk about trade, people are terrified. National Bank of Canada came out, or the Bank of Canada, came out recently and said the reason for inflation right now is because of imports. It's not because of our domestic products here in Canada. So that's scary for the average person. I think that's the other thing that so many people were looking for the budget is the cost of living. So we're talking about what is the cost of living. I just want to go back, if I can, just for a sec, though. And we talk about people coming to Alberta. There's the whole other factor of Canadians coming to Alberta. Canadians used to come here before because we were in boom. Now they're coming here for their affordability. I see lots of food companies moving their company from BC because they're saying, you know what, we're in Richmond and our average staff can't buy houses. Our average staff can't live here anymore. What are we going to do? And my always pitch is when I talk to them, I'm like, well, here, come to Edmonton and you can probably buy an apartment for what you are going to put your down payment for in Vancouver for your apartment.
Literally.
So come on by and move your business here. But it doesn't take away, so I think the immigration thing is it's also Canadians coming here.
Bunny slippers in our live chat, powered by Park Power. Get exclusive discounts on internet, electricity, and natural gas by visiting parkpower.ca/realtalk. Says we've got to get off the reliance on one major area for revenue. Says they killed the renewable industry that could have had a huge advantage for Alberta. We can get into that, but let's talk about diversifying the economy. It's almost comical. It's not funny, but it's almost comical how long we've been talking about diversifying Alberta's economy. But it seems like every time it really starts to gain traction, oil prices go back up. Alberta's back high on the hog again. We're looking at a surplus for a year or two, whether or not that actually manifests. And then we really don't seem to do it. Do you get the sense in this budget that Alberta's on the right track in that context?
Well, no, I would actually describe it, and I've described it before when I was in politics, Ryan. You know this? It's like having an addiction. You're like, just give me one more hit and I won't do it again. I just need one more hit. We actually had bumper stickers that said, give me one more boom and I promise not to piss it away this time. We're addicted to that. And as soon as we get high on oil prices, we forget everything else that we're trying to do to get our economy in order. That's part of the reason why the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce and all the partners in the Edmonton economic ecosystem are really going to work hard on Port Edmonton. We have the largest airport in the country with capacity for growth for manufacturing. We have both rail lines that come through here with their major hubs. We have access to Port of Prince Rupert. We have access to Vancouver. Edmonton is the North Star for North America. Everything that comes in could land in Edmonton and move through the rest of North America, and everything leaving can do the same. It can come through Edmonton. So something like Port Edmonton, I think, has an incredible, powerful message that we can really diversify our economy, focus on agricultural products, focus on manufacturing, focus on innovation and technology and pharmaceutical innovations. I mean, we've got API that if Canada gets a Nobel Prize in pharmaceuticals for new innovations, it's going to happen here in Edmonton. The chief science officer already won a Nobel Prize for that. Right here in Edmonton, we have that person, we have that facility. This city has a lot, and I think it can be the first place this province where that growth can happen, and we can work on that diversification. But we've got to take it seriously and recognize it's not a short initiative. It's a generational transformation that we have to incorporate now.
If I can jump in on that, one of the things I think that's so frustrating in food and in the beverage industry is that we don't even really have sometimes a home in our ecosystem. So if you go to someone, you're like, are you a manufacturer? Are you agri-food? We're the only province where agriculture minister is called agriculture and irrigation. And not to say that irrigation isn't important, and I think he's doing an incredible job. When you talk about going to other countries, I was so excited to see Mr. Sigurdsson in India and in Dubai recently and really promoting products from here. But we have to remember that we're not sending over pure canola. We need this to become a product. And the best way that we can do that is to invest in the manufacturers that are calling this home. We have here in Edmonton alone, you have Dairy Queen, Safeway, Loblaws, all these places, Costco, countries all over the world are choosing this to bake their goods, to make their goods. And we just need to keep increasing that because it's just going to keep growing.
Isn't this the same conversation we've been having about oil and gas and value adding and refining? I mean, isn't that the exact same thing we've been talking about? The principles apply?
But if I might add, even within the oil and gas space, we tend to look at diversification as purely, especially right now as a tech and AI thing. So if you're not a tech and AI company, you're not really an entrepreneur. You're not growing the industry. I would argue, and I'd argue this till I die, we have some of the most skilled machinists on this planet. We do things in cold weather, construction, manufacturing. We do things in cold weather that other people cannot do. Yet when it comes to building a tunnel in Northern Europe, they don't come to us. When they're drilling in the most inhospitable places on earth, they don't come to us. We have that experience, but we don't have the confidence to go out and say, yeah, we can do this. And not only can we do this, we can do it better than anybody else can, because we've been doing it better than everyone else can.
Yeah.
Let's get loud, I think, is Doug's next bumper sticker.
Yeah.
But why don't we? Let's dig a little bit deeper into that. You're saying we don't have the confidence. I mean, Alberta's a province that presents itself as one that and I don't mean it. I mean, we live here on purpose. I love Alberta. We're proudly based in Alberta. We talk about the Alberta advantage. We talk about the entrepreneurial spirit. Where's that swagger?
What I think, to be honest, is I don't think we respect the fact that we have a major oil and gas infrastructure here. So what iterative things can we do based on the expertise that we have right now to continue to grow our industry and to grow our exports? When we look at business and we talk about diversifying the economy, it's always, how can I do something that's drastically different than what I'm doing right now? How do I bring in people that do nothing like we, again, AI and tech, that's, it's a far distance away from the things that we're very good at and the things that the oil and gas industry has built. The oil and gas industry has built this infrastructure, yet we are afraid of using it, or we're embarrassed to use it because that doesn't count as diversification if it's not completely different than the oil and gas business. And I think that mindset has to change.
Ryan, I did a speech and a presentation on the other side of the country when I was a politician. And I remember it was actually Newfoundland. They asked me, what happens, our oil and gas is picking up our offshore developments. Tell me the positive and the negatives of oil and gas. And being from rural Alberta, I said, well, it will fire up your economy. It'll create great revenue. But, one of the challenges we have in rural Alberta is that everyone goes and works in oil and gas. They get paid a lot of money. You discover the restaurants are half shut down and the hotels are half shut down because no one wants to be paid the smaller salary to do that. And so now you don't have a place to sleep, you don't have a place to eat. And then when oil and gas goes down, nobody wants to go back to those jobs. And so there are negative consequences. I had threats on my life for months after that because people said, how dare you? Yeah, literally. I had the RCMP had to come by in my house constantly to check when I wasn't home to make sure my family was safe. People threatened our lives. And that's because as soon as you said anything negative about oil and gas, well, that's what we do. It's horrible, and you can't talk about that. I think the challenge that we have sometimes is that we're so inward focused on our particular industry or on the country and the situation. We need to become more international in our scope of thought and recognize we have a lot to offer and there's bigger things to do. We should be talking about how Edmonton and Alberta are going to lead Canada's economy on international deals and how we're going to reach new markets instead of having a conversation about how we've been mistreated by Ottawa. We've got an opportunity to fix that, to move forward and to lead the country. And yet now we're talking about how, if you say anything negative about one particular industry, you're evil and you deserve to die, and that it's Canada's fault that we're not We've got to think internationally, or we'll never achieve the full potential that we have. We'll never actually achieve the diversification and the reputation and the brand that we have. If we keep thinking small and internally, and we're focused on being angry, then we're going to wind up small and internal and angry. We need to focus on being international and big.
And I don't want to say focus on being angry, but I do want to say that sometimes I feel like a little kid in Ottawa. I feel like, well, what about me? wait, what about me? What about my industry? We just as a nation, we invested over $100 per an employee in the auto sector, cents per an employee in the food and beverage sector. We're the largest employer manufacturing in Canada, and how are we getting cents on the dollar? That to me makes me go, and I hear what you're saying, like I don't want to be going erg, and I do want to look at other markets, but at the same point, we have to diversify even in Canada and say it's not just auto and it's not just gas, and that there's some other industries that have invested millions, billions of dollars that are ready to succeed.
Am I reading sorry to Doug, but am I reading these numbers correctly? Is Alberta's food and beverage processing industry worth $28 billion? Is that annually?
Annually and growing.
That's not a joke.
No. Pay attention to me.
I was just going to say, that's why when we go to Ottawa, I think we need to step up and be inspirational and talk about, try and uplift the other provinces and say, look, we're going to lead this. We want you to come along with us, instead of saying, this isn't fair. Let's focus on why I have a bad situation. We need a little more inspiration. I think we're poised. The right opportunity. I mean, every challenge creates a new opportunity. The tariff situation, the United States situation, these are new opportunities for us to band together and to grow the economy well beyond our borders and between our borders, instead of talking about poor me and it's not fair. We need some inspiration.
I should ask you, to be fair, the same question I asked Naheed Nenshi. Your thoughts, or has the Edmonton I don't know why I'm laughing about that.
I don't know why you're laughing. No,
I just love asking political leaders or politically adjacent leaders how they feel about a sales tax.
I'm not
in
in
Alberta.
politics. I've been through rehab.
I said
you're
politically adjacent. But just, and I'm going to ask all three of you for your thoughts and our live chat
on this side and listen to
the reason why they sat over there.
Everybody get your popcorn, because I'm about to ask the chamber head what he thinks. No, does the Edmonton Chamber have an official position on a sales tax? I have to imagine with your hundreds of different members from different sectors, different ideologies, you'd probably have a difference in opinion among your membership. But your thoughts on a sales tax?
Well, I know that our members, they'll say right away, as soon as there's a sales tax, you have to change your point of sale, you have to add a lot of new technology, you have to collect it yourself and then send it into the government, and it creates more work. So our members in general would say they prefer not to have that complication. I think, though, if you ask them, how are we going to get out of this situation where we rely on oil and gas, they'd recognize that the taxes are part of the makeup that we have to address. You can't cut $10 billion out of this budget. As Minister Horner, you showed a clip before, indicated, you'd eliminate everything except healthcare, education, and advanced education. It's just not viable, and we're still short on those other three departments that would be left. So we have that structural issue that we need to deal with, and until then, we're going to keep riding this roller coaster.
Alim, as mentioned, and I'll remind our audience, this is your Real Talk debut, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it's awesome to have you here. You're here with Jaffer Group. People can check out jaffergroup.com. But you guys do, a ton of investing in real estate and development. But you do, let me say, bigger picture, community building. And we can't talk about a province that has eyes on doubling its population, and we can't talk about an influx of new Edmontonians, of new Calgarians, and without talking about growth of communities. And there's a million different implications on that. We could talk about everything from fire halls to schools to hospitals to actually in the ground infrastructure. I mean, obviously a lot of angles of attack on this, but in that context and with the overarching theme here of budget analysis, just your thoughts on community building in the province of Alberta and what the future of that looks like, whether or not you think this province is well positioned to manage what it's asking for and what it needs.
I would say from an entrepreneur perspective, from a business owner perspective, I think we do have, there's certainly the capacity of the developers and the home builders in this province. We certainly have the capacity to do far more than we're doing. I don't think we'll be constrained by having enough good developers that know what they're doing, that know how to raise money, that know how to put put pipe in the ground. We have more than enough strong businesses to be able to do that. It's whether our municipalities can keep up with it. It's whether our municipal infrastructure can keep up with it, whether we're willing to make the investments in growing the cities that we have and keeping them affordable at the same time. And I think, if anything, that will be the constraint. Actually building the homes and developing the land. I mean, we have some of the largest developers in Canada that are based here. That we can do. Can the municipalities keep up? Can they keep their budgets in check? Can they keep the cities going? I don't know. I hope so. I don't know.
You have thoughts on that? I mean, I'll remind the audience, you're a Minister of Municipal Affairs. You have great insights into the relationship between the province and municipalities. We got into it with Nenshi a little bit, played that clip from Calgary's Mayor Farkas. They're concerned about the allocation of property taxes. Yeah. I mean, like I said, a million angles of approach on the community building file.
Yeah, no, and you know me. I mean, community building is the single most important job on earth. If you build strong communities, everything else takes care of itself. So at the local level, it's critically important. And I would say I recognize that municipalities are chronically underfunded, and though there weren't tax increases like on Albertans on their income, property taxes are going up because of the education portion, and most municipalities are already stressed and stretched trying to find the resources available to help make those communities better. So it is a real challenge. The solution, I think, is actually a conversation at all three levels of government to really figure out how you're going to appropriate funds to each level to deal with the services they need and make sure that each one is meeting their obligations. I mean, we constantly talk about safety in Edmonton and downtown Edmonton, and the province has stepped up a little bit in some of their affordable housing and some of the crime. And I would say in all our surveys of our members, I mean, if I was to sum everything up in one line, it would be deal with the safety. That's what people want. The number one issue we have is making sure that people feel safe on their streets. So the province has more to step up on because it is their obligation, but the city feels compelled to do it without the resources because it's their streets that crime and that unhoused, the addictions, the mental health issues, that's where they appear. So we need the province and the municipalities to still get together and address those issues and not download the costs onto the municipal government that has the least ability to raise funds to deal with that issue.
Bianca, you're nodding. We'll remind people, by the way, that your chance to shamelessly plug your family's businesses as well. You're in the brewing business. You're in the distilling business.
We just won Best New Restaurant in Calgary for True Wild, so
please
head down there.
No big deal. But obviously, this is something when you talk about community building, when you talk about safety on streets, when you talk about all this kind of stuff. Yeah, sure, you're a big shot with this big organization, this association. I'm having some fun with it. You're heading out to Ottawa to lobby the federal lawmakers and all that kind of stuff.
But I'm not a lobbyist.
But also at the end of the day, you're an employer, you're a creator, you're a risk taker, you're a business owner. That stuff impacts you in a much more visceral way.
And I'm a mom, right?
And
I feel like that's like, we talk about all these different things, but at first I'm a mom, right? First you're a dad. And I think at the end of the day, safety, like I said at the beginning, when I said what matters most to my employees, safety, education, and hospitals. Right? We just want our kids healthy, we want our kids educated, and we want our kids safe. That is my number one role by any of this. And then when I go beyond that and I look at everything and you talk about, I appreciate your comments about appropriating funds and where we have them and where we're moving things around. If we go back to the budget, one thing that gave me some inspiration is to seeing how much money is going into workforce and how we are really looking at our workforce. And as a mom, the future jobs of our children. What exists here in our province? Where are we investing in? Where are we trying to inspire children to get into? Where are we trying to grow our communities? Not only having the coolest ministry name out there with Jedi Ministry, but with the work that they're doing, they're diversifying. And that gets my members excited. I said before, maybe you don't feel like you have a full home under agriculture. Maybe you don't have a full home under manufacturing, but we all are part of the workforce.
I want to dip into our live chat. It's humming this morning. People are enjoying what you're bringing to the table. By the way, Doug, I'll let you know, Super Chat Ken has kicked in $5. He's bought each of you a beer. You can grab a cold one or a non-alc option from our Real Talk beer fridge with Super Chat Ken. He just says, I'm loving this panel. He says Doug would get my vote in a heartbeat for whatever party he chose to run for. As a matter of fact, Ken specified, he said special coffees for all. So there you can go with one of our specialty Hansen cream liqueurs. I'm loving what we're seeing from Real Talkers here as well, and always want to make sure that they have a big part of the conversation. How about this one from Dwayne on diversifying the economy? Nice little metaphor here. Says it's like a session musician. They have to adapt to playing different styles of music. He says that's the exact same thing as diversification. I was lucky enough to be in one of the front rows last night for Matt Anderson at the Jubilee Auditorium. Oh my gosh, unbelievable. I wish the concert was 6 hours long. But a lot of people chiming in. James says, look at this though, when it comes to collaboration, doesn't always happen. Says when we needed to drill a tunnel for the Calgary Green Line, who are the people trying to block it? He says oil and gas. What's up with that, right? Ryan wonders why not make having kids more affordable for Canadians. Interesting comment. Maybe more of a federal government policy than provincial. Wouldn't have to be, but kind of an interesting point there. Ken says there's no need to put subjective rules on renewables based on ideology. The new market rules will incentivize natural gas power to join the market with days ahead of offers. Many of you are sharing your thoughts on what you might do to make the budget different. Nia, talking about cost of living, says the cost of housing and rent in oil towns does make it difficult to afford life if you don't work in oil and gas, which is a really important point. I remember hearing how, some operators, you may reference like a Tim Hortons or the quick service food outlets and some of the incentives they've had to come up with to allow their employees to even live in those jurisdictions. That's been the same thing with tourism and hospitality for a long time, hasn't it, too?
Yeah, you look at Jasper and Banff and you're dealing with the same issues, right? That's why we have staff housing
Yeah.
when you're in those areas. But the other part of that is that I think it's part of the equation, right? It's part that people understand as employers. You have to pay X because you are where you are.
Yeah, you operate a bit. You're invested in a business.
My
You're in the
husband's-
mountain parks. Your husband is. Your family is. Is that something that's been does that just come with the territory?
Yeah, I was also born in Banff, so I know
didn't know
very
that.
few people are. My dad was also
You and
born in
Ryan
Banff.
Smith, right?
Yeah, Ryan Smith, my dad and I.
Yeah.
But, I think when you speak about your history with municipalities and your present work with municipalities, small towns deal with different problems. I brought up Key, Alberta. We have our tourism areas. There's different things that are happening in small towns that don't necessarily aren't big city problems. But for them, it's difficult. They also have their own workforce challenges, and then they have their own housing challenges. When you talk about people looking to develop, not always is someone looking to develop a new business in Banff with everything that comes along with being part of living in a national park.
And what I would say is, I think, the broader province feels that, in Banff and Jasper, I understand there's staff housing. It's tough, it's restricted, but there's staff housing for gas stations in White Court and in, Mayerthorpe and Peace River. There's not enough housing in a lot of these places because people are not going up to the building's expensive. You don't know if by the time you finish a house that there's going to be somebody to purchase it because boom and bust, who knows who's going to be at the end of it. And the person purchasing it doesn't know whether they'll still have a job that can afford them that house. It's not just a Banff and Jasper problem. That workforce housing is across, Alberta, outside of Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer.
The housing one's an interesting one too, and you and I have spoken about this before as well, because every level of government, and I don't mean it disrespectfully, but strategically, they like to blame the other levels of government, right? And it's an issue municipally, it's an issue provincially, it's an issue federally, obviously, and everybody loves to pass the buck, right? Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And to be honest, I think everybody has a part to play in solving the problem. I think it's agreeing on what part everybody's going to take on, which I know is a pipe dream and will never happen, but that's really what it's going to take, right? Certain things are going to be federal problems. If I look at, supportive and affordable housing, should that be a provincial or federal problem? Probably. We shouldn't be solving that at a municipal level. On a municipal basis, can we make planning and development cheaper, quicker, permitting faster, inspections faster? Yeah,
without pissing everybody off at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is maybe more easier said than done. There's a Flamethrower submission on that, by the way, coming up in just a few minutes.
I don't build 8-plexes.
Yeah, you want to be clear about that? At least not mid-block, right?
No, never.
You look like you maybe had something you wanted to add to that on the housing front.
Well, it does take all three levels of government. The municipalities have the land. The province is the one that do the skills training and the trades. The federal government has the immigration to bring in the right skilled people to help with building the housing. All of these elements work together, and it's really important that they do so that we don't wind up with the horrible housing boom that we had in the 80s, where we just mass manufactured homes and they were horrible and poor quality, and it was devastating. That's the challenge with government. They all over the world, it's just the nature. I was there. They blame somebody else, and I don't know. We need solutions more than anything else, and less ego.
On the PST front, by the way, we've got a ton of comments. Obviously, I knew we would. And I quite enjoyed debating this, to be honest with you. Aaron says, a PST would be political suicide. That's what everybody always says. Everybody always says it's the third rail of Alberta politics. Meantime, Tracy says studies have been done on the feasibility of a sales tax, and it's mostly positive. Dwayne says back in 2007, the Alberta PCs were considering a PST for Alberta. Says, I remember that. You weren't in government in 2007, were you? That's a little bit before your time.
Yeah, no, I
were
was
you?
I'm the one that raised.
But you're only 29, Doug.
I know. No, I'm actually the one that said a long time ago we have to fix our structural issues, and talked about the level of income tax, the level of corporate tax. We need to talk about the structural issues, and even a consumption tax. All of that should be on the table to figure out how we're going to fix this over the long term. And I think it was Maclean's magazine, when it was still around, called me about once a month and then every 3 months just to see if I was still alive, because it was such political suicide. But my point was not that we need a sales tax, but we need to talk about the structural deficit that we have in our over-reliance on oil and gas. And we can't keep doing this and then lament the fact that we got what we asked for. We need to have a serious conversation about what we're going to do in this province. And we have so much potential. If we had changed our tax structure, 20 years ago when I talked about it, I think by now I'm estimating, but we'd probably have $40 or $50 billion in the bank, and we wouldn't have a deficit. This wouldn't be an issue right now. But we keep saying we're not going to cut anything because we can't afford to cut that much, and we're not going to raise taxes because we like our low taxes, but we also shouldn't rely on oil and gas. But now we're stuck with relying on oil and gas. I used to say to people, you don't want me to cut anything, you don't want me to raise taxes, and you don't want me to rely on oil and gas. And I would look at them and say, I think you need to go to the church down the street because I can't do miracles.
04, man, time flies. 04, Battle River Wainwright. Pardon me. I was like, geez.
I'm older than you remember.
Well, there you go. Noob Try Again says, I'm all for a PST along with increasing income tax exemption amounts on the lowest bracket significantly. Says, but I don't trust this government to manage that. Says, I think that they're poor stewards of resources. That from Noob Try Again. Others are saying, Ken here says, unless maybe an HST, like a harmonized sales tax, says no new system required, same products, same exclusions. Says, but Alberta won't do it because it currently relies on the federal government to collect and return. Well, for now, it sounds like this government would be more keen on collecting its own taxes, though, right? That's you're rolling your eyes.
Well, I don't know if I want to talk about this very much, but I kind of, when I first started politics, was pretty keen on collecting our own taxes, having our own pension plan, having our own police force. And it was Ralph Klein who looked at me and said, you really believe that? And I said, well, I think we need to explore it. So he put me on a committee with Ian McCullen to study Alberta's place in Confederation. And it took 4 months, and I came back and recognized, we pay the federal government $3 million to collect our taxes. Think about the thousands of people we would have to hire, the extra forms, businesses, small businesses, every person would have to fill because it has to be a completely different form if we collect our own taxes. The bureaucracy and the cost is not worth the time or investment to make it worthwhile. And it turns out none of those firewall letter issues were actually going to make Alberta stronger. In fact, they would significantly weaken this province.
If you look at things that exist, that you already have like 3 forms to fill out, let's say recycling, right? If you are recycling a product, you make a product here and you are recycling it across Canada, that's 7 forms you're filling out. I don't think businesses actually have the manpower to be able to handle exactly what you just described.
Interesting. RS 500 says a PST would at least be more honest, but instead we have a series of dink and dunk service charges. There's a lot of talk about charges and fees and kind of tacked on costs for the average Albertan in this budget. I don't know if that would be something that would be resonating with your members.
Well, I don't know if I don't know if we actually all understand the complexities. I've done a lot of work in the United States, and we always talk about how they have lower taxes. But when I talk to people and you look at all the extra costs and all the extra fees, yeah, their income tax is low, but they actually, from my calculations, the majority of states pay a lot more than us because they pay for their own health care. They pay for there's some cities that have their own income tax. It's such a complex, messy system. And so you hire people to find ways to get out of as much as you can, but only those who can afford it can get out of those systems. I don't know that it's a better system. I think we're better off having things paid upfront, like healthcare. It nets it out better than private healthcare, and instead of nickeling and diming with a lot of other fees like they do in the United States.
And with this particular budget, they've raised the tourism levy here from 4% to 6%, and as somebody in the hotel business, I mean that makes a big difference. I think we underestimate outside of Banff and Jasper how much of our travel is in province for this province. Edmontonians going to Calgary, Calgarians going to Edmonton, people from up north coming down to Edmonton to shop and to see family. It still is a tax on people that are in this province. So we nibble around the edges and we say we're doing things as bringing money in from the outside, but we're recycling the same money in, what is, with a $8-9 billion deficit and $27 billion over 3 years. Like, it's clearly not moving the needle enough to make a difference in how much revenue we're bringing in.
That's an interesting angle. I appreciate you bringing that up. Aurora Astra in our chat says, can we just raise taxes to be the same as the next lowest province in each income and sales tax category? Says that would bring in an estimated $10 billion. You can't pay slumlord rent and expect a mansion. We'll do this as we wrap this Real Talk Roundtable in partnership with the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. We always say to our panelists, typically every Friday, this is your chance to put something on the table. You are surrendering your right to text me later and say, I wish we would have had a chance to discuss this. This is your chance to put something in front of the audience, maybe that you'd like them to walk with this weekend. People will be listening to this on their commute, while they're walking their dogs, while they're heading out on their road trips to Jasper and Banff as well. Something to walk with, something to sound super smart in front of their friends as they're all talking about Alberta budget. You look ready to go right now.
I don't know, but I would say if you can buy something local, it doesn't have to be everything. Right now I'm wearing poppy barley shoes. I'm drinking coffee that's roasted right here. If we can all create a stronger circular economy and just purchase one thing every day that is local, just imagine the financial impact we're going to make. So maybe if we can all try and just, whether you're wearing something local or you're eating something local, to make that contribution to our ecosystem is massive. And what I said before about the Bank of Canada, if we're seeing this massive increase in affordability costs because of our imports, just choose local.
I love that. Let me put in a shameless plug that if anybody in Calgary is looking for a fantastic spot to grab dinner or a drink, they should check out True Wild Distilling at truewilddistilling.com. That's a nice way to support local. All right, Alim, over to you. One thing, one takeaway.
One takeaway, if I were to say anything, and I hope this does resonate with people. If you look across Canada, every province, has barriers to entry in so many different businesses. If you go to Toronto or Vancouver, it's next to impossible to get into the construction business. You need a ton of capital. You need a certain amount of expertise. You need connections. You need this, that. One of the things I love most about this province, and specifically about this city, is that there is enough room in every business to make a living and to grow and to be the next big thing. So whether you're running a sushi restaurant or a construction business, it doesn't matter. There's room in this market. And so, it requires the bravery, it requires the courage, and it requires the self-belief, of course, to do those things. But it is still the most affordable place to start a business. downtown Edmonton is probably a third of what it would cost 5 years ago, and about half of what it would cost in the suburbs. There's space available. If there was ever a time to take a risk and to start a business, this is still the cheapest place to do it in, and I hope to see a lot more of that.
I love that. By the way, you can check out more about what Alim's team is doing by visiting jaffergroup.com. Last word to you, Prez.
Well, I love this city. I think Edmonton underachieves on its potential. We have so much going for us. I've said that many presentations that one of Edmonton's and Edmontonians' greatest attributes is its humility, and one of its greatest weaknesses is its humility. We need to start to think bigger. The province, I think also we need to take our innovation and our entrepreneurialism and our creativity and take it across Canada and the globe. And Canada needs to take its brand and its reputation and its solution seeking, its innovation across the world. If I gave one bit of advice to everybody, it's if you're angry, you're wrong. But we need to start to think bigger. If you look for reasons to be angry or you look for reasons to be small, you'll find them. If you look for reasons to be bigger and for us to achieve our full potential, you'll find them all over the place. And that's what this city and this province and this country need to do right now. The world's waiting for us, and we need to get off our ass and get busy.
I love it. That's the president and CEO of the the Edmonton Chamber of Commerce. You can read more about how the Edmonton Chamber makes your business their business since 1889, by the way. You guys are older than the province.
Yes, we are.
That is mind-blowing. Check out edmontonchamber.com. We here at Real Talk are very proud to partner with our friends at the Edmonton Chamber in producing this Real Talk Roundtable featuring Doug Griffiths, Alim, Somji, and Bianca Parsons. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate you guys.
Thanks.
Great insights there. Real Talkers, over to you in the live chat in just a moment. Before we get there, I want to draw your attention to this piece, this feature here in the Calgary Herald. You can see it online at calgaryherald.com. This has been passed along by our friends at Kubi Renewable Energy, in particular their founder and CEO, Jake Kubiski. This is his way of getting his word in on this budget special, this episode of Real Talk. Jake passed this along. This is a feature published February 21st by Jordan Dye of the Calgary Herald. You're looking for the headline, Alberta broke its renewable energy market. 2026 will decide if it can be fixed. Jake says this article sums up nicely this government's poor policy on renewables. He says, I figured I'd share it with the Real Talk audience. Jake, we appreciate you passing that along. If you, your family, your business, your commercial office space, your farm is considering going green and investing in solar with an installation this spring or summer, now is the time to get in touch with the team at Kubi. That's KUBY.ca for a free solar quote. You're going to want to get yourself onto that installation schedule because it fills up fast. Nobody in Western Canada installed more solar last year than the team at Kubi, and they're expecting a big year in 2026 as well. Get your free quote today at Kubi.ca. Our friends at UCAN Youth Services doing amazing work helping young people out of harm's way and onto a path of economic independence. If you don't yet follow them on Instagram, I want to encourage you to do so at UCAN Youth Services. The most recent video that they've posted are success stories. These are young adults that have participated in their Ready to Work programs, either the Verto program, the Road to Work program, and now they're granting interviews with huge smiles on their faces talking about their new jobs. They have entered the workforce. They're making contributions, and the return on that investment is huge. They talk about the confidence that they've gained. They talk about what it's doing for their outlook moving forward. This is what UCAN does, and that's why we're so proud to have named them our charity of choice this year. You can learn more about supporting UCAN and partnership opportunities. If you're an employer that's looking for reliable, motivated, entry-level workers, why not a partnership with UCAN? You can connect with them today at ucan.ca. Let them know you heard about it on Real Talk. And don't forget, UCAN Comedy Nights are back March 9th to the 11th, March 16th to the 18th. We're proud at Real Talk to be getting a table of 10 one of those nights. We're bringing some of our friends This is not a big cash call. It's a hilarious night of comedy at Rick Bronson's comic strip at West Edmonton Mall, and, of course, a reminder of the important work that UCAN does. Good laughs, a great cause, and an even greater impact. You can check out ucan.ca to get your tickets for March UCAN Comedy Nights. And our friends at Play Alberta reminding you that every Thursday here on the show, we present Alberta Wins. These are stories coming out of our home province, Albertans making an impact on the international stage. Or sometimes it's just in the community around them. We love it. It was Kelty, whose Alberta Win yesterday shone the light on entrepreneurs down in Airdrie doing an amazing job. You can submit your Alberta Win to talk@RyanJesperson.com. From major casino winners every hour to jackpots worth millions, hundreds of popular games, and money that stays in the province, there's never been a better time to sign up for Play Alberta. You can download the app today to get started with casino, sports, and lottery all in one app. Of course, you've got to be 18 or over to play, and when you gamble, please use your game sense. Real Talk live chat is humming this morning. Love to see it. Shout out to everybody that's joining us and watching on the live stream presented by California Closets. Gilles says, making it more affordable to have children. I think it was Ryan that suggested that earlier in the chat. He says that means government regulation in things like housing and groceries, education, healthcare, childcare. He says these are all areas that are significantly underfunded in Alberta. Alberta Girl says the budget presentation yesterday made her think of Jim Prentice. Interesting. Reboot Alberta says, why don't we have this kind of pragmatic, grounded, and still future forward thinking from these two legacy political parties? Others of you saying, GP, staff housing used to be a normal expense, a regular expense by large corporations in many small communities. Tracy says, as a business owner, I appreciate in this budget generous write-offs, but we could probably do with less. Marie pointing out a business in Claresholm, shout out to Claresholm this morning, built housing for their employees so the workers didn't have to commute from surrounding cities. Sounds like a smart move. Bruce checking in. Thanks for your YouTube channel membership, Bruce. He says, I'm just reminding people to put a few $100s into savings to pay for that oversized property education tax. A heads up there. Tracy says the government role continues to decrease as responsibility here is shifted to individuals. Interesting comment that could relate to an increase in fees and levies and the like. A lot of talk on sales tax here. I got to say, I feel like there's 300 or 400 comments here just on a PST. Johnny, I know that they always say that it's political suicide. I know that they always say it's the third rail of politics.
What's
because
the problem?
Alberta's whole thing has been that it is the lowest corporate taxes. It's the lowest income taxes.
Yeah, but we're not talking about corporate tax. We're talking about PST.
Well, and this is the trade-off, right? So
corporations don't give a shit about PST.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on what corporation it is.
It's a marketing advantage, and it's an advantage for the people that live here. But
yeah,
corporations, especially international ones that come here and invest, don't care about PST. So,
I think for me, whether or not it's, people can say that things are political suicide, or people can say that things are the third rail of politics, but at some point, the rubber's got to hit the road. At some point, you've got to acknowledge that revenues aren't where they need to be. There's, Alberta will run a recurring deficit. The debt is getting way past the point where anybody feels comfortable. And like Doug Griffiths just said, what's your plan?
Yeah.
And if your plan's not a PST, and I know that some people will cringe, and I want you to know, I hear you, and I recognize this important point that an additional tax cannot always be the solution to revenue woes or to budget woes. And there are a lot of you in this chat in particular this morning that are letting us know that you have trust issues with this government on allocating the revenues from a sales tax. I would virtually guarantee you, as a matter of fact, I'd probably bet my house that Alberta's current premier would never be the one to introduce a provincial sales tax. But at some point, like I wonder, and I'm picking this time frame on purpose, I wonder if 20 years from now, if Alberta might have one, it would take a huge amount of political will.
Sorry to interrupt you, but like Alberta's the only province without one.
Yep.
And if we're talking about
but that's what we love about it.
And if we're talking about smoothing boom bust between budget cycles, that's exactly what it would do. And we're not talking about 100 million, 200. We're talking about 6, 8 possibly, I heard $10 billion in the chat. I don't know about that. Probably between $6 to $8 billion in the first year you implemented it. So I don't see a problem with it. I mean, I don't think it's going to bankrupt most people. Of course, nobody likes a new tax, but I mean, I think this whole thing, it's kind of like a pride thing too. Like we're the only province without it, right? And people here who were born here, who've lived here their whole life, of course they're not used to it. Me, I've lived in Toronto where there's, PST or HST, whatever. Went to Vancouver, absolutely the craziest tax ever. Like you buy a chocolate bar and it's twice the price. Okay, that's a joke, but you know what I mean. And then I came here and of course it's great. It's an incentive for people to come here. But when we're talking about large investment corporations, they only care about the corporate tax, and that's low here. There's still all sorts of other incentive that we could draw people to Alberta. It wouldn't be like, the doors would be shut to our province and everyone would leave, because we do the same thing every other province is doing. You also mentioned 20 years, and you also mentioned a text or a chat where someone had said we need to make it easier to have kids. I do believe that. I think the return on investment when you give tax breaks and things to people to help them procreate is great. But let's be honest, we can't wait 25 years for a workforce here in Alberta. Yeah. We need to build homes. We need to build all these data centers. We need tradespeople. We need to grow our economy. And we can't give incentives now and hope that when people have kids and they grow up in 25 years that we'll have this workforce. We need it now. So like when we're talking about temporary foreign workers and immigration that all of a sudden we flipped on, all those things shutting the door to is just get all these things we want, affordable housing, amazing data centers, oil and gas infrastructure, whatever it is, solar energy, wind, people have to build it.
Yeah.
And we need them now.
Yeah, this renewables conversation will continue, and the approach this government has taken, which is not positive, and has stifled it. I've seen some comments here in the live chat, people saying that the Alberta government has, as a matter of fact, nailed its feet to the floor when it comes to diversifying the economy with basically stifling the growth, with inhibiting the growth of the renewables sector. I wanted to touch on a few things I saw. Meta Modern wondered, isn't True Wild Distilling an American company? It is absolutely not an American company. It's an incredible business out of Calgary, and they're winning awards early in their existence, and so a big shout out to them. That is a startup based in Calgary, a proud and amazing grassroots Alberta story. Amazing to see Taylor Soroka in our chat today. Taylor, her dad Murray, do an amazing job. She's been on the show before talking about Jasper Place Wellness Center. They're collaborating with the Royal Alexandra Hospital Foundation on that just incredible bridge healing program. Remember we talked about that? That's decreasing wait times in ERs and providing more permanent housing solutions. And it is the housing is healthcare model. Taylor, awesome to see you in our chat. She says, do we underachieve or are we undervalued? Erica says, you want more people to buy local, you got to stop making products prohibitively expensive. Says there's a local section at a lot of grocery stores. Products are laughably overpriced, she says. I guess it depends on when you look at what you're paying for, right? A lot of times you look at the quality. A lot of times you look at what goes into like input costs and what people need to get out of it. Oftentimes what you're going to source as local, in my mind, is going to be probably healthier as well. I mean, 100%. It depends on what you're talking about, but you're going to get what you paid for.
Fresher, healthier, better. And I would say stop going to big chain stores because they're the reason those organic, those locally grown products in that aisle are high. They are pricing them high. Go to the farmer's market right here.
Go to Friesen Brothers.
Pick up a potato there. It's like everything is cheap when grown and sold directly by the farmers. So, I mean, you have to get up. You have to get out of your house. And yeah, you might have. I hate doing it too. It's the worst thing my partner ever asked me. Our whole relationship was, do you want to go to a farmer's market on Saturday or Sunday morning at 10 a.m.? But you go there and the honey is what it should cost.
Yeah. Did you know that they keep bees on the roof of Friesen Brothers Rabbit Hill store?
I know. You were telling me this.
On the roof. You can get the honey in the store that was from the roof.
Can I straight up like Winnie the Pooh go up there and just grab a...
Well, I mean, if you say that Real Talk sent you, they might let you go up there. But you got to wear the suit, man. You can't just go up and Eileen says, what an excellent roundtable today. Thanks for everybody. MG, I want to hit this comment head on. Says, I'm moving to Calgary next month. I've been looking for Calgary's alternative to this show. Says there isn't one really. Great content on this page. This is the Calgary Show. You don't need, we heard from Calgary's mayor today, not Edmonton's. Did you know, guys, we've just done our year in review for all of our sponsors. Did you know that for 3 out of the 12 months last year, YouTube in Calgary outperformed YouTube in Edmonton on this show?
Really?
How cool is that? So we have a big shout out to our Calgary audience. This is Alberta's #1 talk show, and we welcome our Southern Alberta tuning audience every single day. I can't believe that Doug Griffiths was elected in 2004. That feels like, I don't know about you, is time catching up to you quickly like it is to me? All of a sudden, everything was like 20 years ago.
Can you stop
What?
talking
I know.
about this?
I'm having like a moment of reckoning in my own life where I'm just realizing how.
I've been 26 for 3 decades.
Oh my gosh, that must be nice. I got to do that. Hey, to talk at RyanJesperson.com, Laura wrote in about the Alberta budget. She says, Jespo, I have a degree in economics and political science, and I've been working in healthcare for over a decade, but I still can't make sense of what's going on here. This is Laura's budget recap. Says here's an assessment of deals that were recently made. 2024 to 2028 is the time frame we're looking at. The United Nurses, the RNs, so the registered nurses, a 12% increase. ATA, the teachers, still fighting in court, sure, a 12% increase. She says general support services, the AUPE, that's Alberta Union of Provincial Employees, 12%. She says in the deals from 2020 to 2024, she says, United Nurses 4.25%, the ATA 3.75%, AUPE 3.25%. She says, I'd like to remind your audience of inflation over those years is over 20%, not even counting what we're looking at over the next few. She sets the table and says, now my question to you and to this audience is, how is it that Alberta claims that they cannot pay inflationary increases for working Albertans, but they have agreed to increase the pay of doctors by about 22% for next year alone, when doctors are already making very generous salaries. Laura says, I know the Alberta government is crying deficit, but the reason for that is poor planning and an unrealistic reliance on oil prices and royalties. She says other petro states use oil revenues to benefit their citizens, like annual payments to Alaskans or fully funded Norwegian Sovereign Wealth Fund. I referenced the Norway thing a couple of days ago. She says we could have a balanced budget that puts working Albertans first and makes sure that corporations and those who have profited in this amazing province and this incredible country pay what they owe. It makes no sense to artificially subsidize the budget with outlandish pie-in-the-sky estimates of oil revenues and asking working people to take less than inflationary increases to pay the difference. She says if you have time for only one thing on your show, Rye, please tell your audience that this government thinks that working people only deserve 3% this year, but doctors are going to get 22%. Is that fair? She says, thank you for your solidarity. That from Laura to talk at RyanJesperson.com.
Solidarity.
I'm not the finance minister. I'm not the premier. I would say that the physician conversation is an interesting one. There's probably obviously a recruitment and retention angle to that. You'd have to look at past deals. You'd probably also have to look at the number of physicians versus the number of nurses and teachers. You'd probably have to look at internal data. I don't know what that would look like, but maybe perhaps even some internal polling on what the public would accept when it came to deals with the teachers and with the nurses as well. I have to assume that this government was not looking to just hand over big wads of cash to physicians. And I would also note, and I'm biased, my dad was a family doctor for many, many years, and I recognize this. We've got a ton of respect for family docs on this show, for any healthcare professional for that matter. But keep in mind as well that doctors are also entrepreneurs and running small businesses. And whatever doctors are charging, this may be obvious, but I don't think that everybody realizes this. When we talk about the generous salaries, in my opinion, and maybe I'll take some flack for this, but it's a fact, when doctors are billing the Alberta government, Alberta Health, for whatever it is now, $27 or $31 or $34 for your visit, out of that, they're also covering their overhead, right? They're covering the cost of their clinic. They're paying their staff. They're paying their nurses. They're paying their front office. And of course, they're covering the expenses that come with running a business as well, like the swabs and and the bed covers and everything else that goes into it. And so I know that there has been issues. There are a lot of doctors that are pulling out of what they're doing right now or considering other career paths within or outside of medicine because they don't even see it as financially viable. And that probably has something to do with it. Again, I'm biased. I know what I've seen growing up. I know the reality there. We spend a lot of time talking to family docs and about family medicine. And they're also having a difficult time, I think, incentivizing med school students and those that are graduating, in other words, the talent of today and tomorrow, to go into family medicine because, quite frankly, they don't see it as worth it. They don't see the risk that they're taking, the hours that they're going to put in, the administrative duties that come along with it as worth it at the end of the day. And I would imagine that factors into it as well. But Laura, you make important points, and I sure appreciate you chiming into the show. I was talking to somebody, by the way, about how to communicate more effectively and more open-mindedly, and they said, don't give a compliment to someone and then say but. They said give a compliment to someone and then say and
as well,
and then share your further thoughts.
But I like what you were saying there. It's weird because doctors, nurses, health professionals, we're both sons of health professionals. They're also kind of, a portion of them being villainized nowadays. And I don't understand this whole thought that doctors are rich and overpaid. And healthcare professionals, like people who run, clinics are making too much money. I think they should make more money. They're well educated. They went to school for a long time to learn. Why is it that we're not villainizing tech owners and people who create apps that rot our brain, but the people who save our lives, they're overpaid? It's ridiculous. Yeah, they should be overpaid.
Well, yeah, people that are pissed off.
They should be well paid.
People hear a neurosurgeon makes $1 million a year. I'm like,
good.
Bro, they're cracking open skulls
and I want
working on brains.
I want the one who's paid the highest in the world.
I want the best
to
one.
Open my brain up and poke around.
Yeah, I don't want Jason's discount neurosurgery.
Yeah. The guy who has to get a second job or you know what I mean? I'm a neurosurgeon, but only during the week. On the weekends, I do Uber and other stuff.
Yeah. Ms. KD says, well, if you are truly Alberta's #1 talk show, then you should come to a live event in Calgary. She says she will volunteer. We're not revealing anything yet, Ms. KD, but we are working on something significant in Calgary. It's not guaranteed. You sure about that, bud? Working on something big in Calgary around the beginning of July. But I'm not announcing. Maybe this is a soft announce. No, this is just a little hint. Super Chat Cam, by the way, says, doctors as a single thing, doctors is not a thing. Family docs are not making substantial salaries, especially family practitioners. Their overhead is substantially higher than specialists. That is absolutely a fact. TC says there's definitely a perk to being part of a union when you're talking about stuff like this. Few people realize how important the benefits alone can be. Erica says doctors and nurses, yeah, sure, they can make good money, but you have to pay them if you want to be competitive. Says I look at salaries in healthcare as investments. That from Erica, which I think is a really good point. Tracy also says, though, what we like to forget is that many unionized folks in the public sector went without raises for a decade. That's absolutely true.
100%.
MetaModern says, I don't know, kind of what you just said, Johnny. Says, I don't know about the rest of you, but if I want the best paid, best talent to take care of me when I get sick or injured.
Right? And it's not just that. I feel like it's the same when I was in media, when I was in radio. It's like you start out, all you do is talk on the radio. Then by the end of my job, a decade later, I was a social media expert. I was, a salesperson. I was all these things. Doctors and nurses and health professionals are the same now. Not only are they having to, it used to be you would just give advice, opinion, prescriptions. People would follow your advice. Now they have to they're like lawyers trying to defend everything they tell their patients. They're being villainized. They're having to go up against people on podcasts and detox cleanse moms and all these people who say just put water and salt or lemon and salt in your water in the morning and meditate and you'll be fine. They're having to defend every day. I feel like their job, the amount of stress that they've intaked the salaries have not kept up in that alone. And then of course, I love when you talk about it, just the overhead. When you walk
into a real thing,
when you walk into a doctor's office and you're this doctor makes X amount of money a year, look around the office. Like, look around everything. Have you ever owned an office and bought everything in there, as well as paid everyone's salary and vacation, health plans? And it's a ridiculous amount of overhead.
Okay, so put it this way though, and I don't know, like, I don't know what the exact rate is, guys. I used to do billing for my dad like years ago, so I could tell you exactly how much doctors would bill for it would be like a general visit or an annual. They'd get paid like whatever, it was like $6 more or something for an annual, because you want them to spend a bit more time talking to you. But let's say approximately doctors, and I think I'm overshooting this for purposes of the thought exercise, but let's say the doctor bills Alberta Health, submits a claim for $40 for your visit to the practice. And let's say that they can see you in and out in 20 minutes. In a circumstance like that, you may feel like you're being rushed. You may feel like the doctor is not taking the proper amount of time to listen to you, but the doc has to keep moving. So let's say the visit is 20 minutes and they can do 3 of them an hour. That means the doctor's not going to grab coffee. The doctor's not able to go like hit the washroom for a few minutes or check their phone. Let's say they're going exam room to exam room to exam room and then back to room 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 all day long. So let's say that the practice is billing $120 an hour. That's $120 an hour before taxes and before expenses. Okay, so you shave taxes. Well, let's say you pay your expenses first. So you pay your staff, you're going to pay your overhead, you're going to pay your rent, you're going to pay everything else, and then you're going to be taxed on what's left. And what's your take home, right? Like, do we really want, and I'm putting out numbers here that are probably not the exact number, but do we want family docs in Alberta making like $45-50 an hour, which is what you can probably walk on to a Suncor job site and make like right now without a high school education? And again, maybe Suncor does require high school education. This is a thought exercise, everybody. But my point is, like, family docs are not making $650,000 a year driving around in 911s. Like that is just not a fact. There are some specialists that do very well and should do very well. It's why we should pay astronauts a lot of money. It's why we should pay cancer researchers a lot of money, because they do something. Obviously, I think I'm preaching to the choir here, but they benefit society in a huge way, and they have a very unique and specialized skill set. People are not going to spend 15 to 20 years, literally, in post-secondary, incurring, in some circumstances, hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loans to graduate and make $55 an hour.
100%. And all the things you just mentioned, research specialists in cancer, diabetes fields, astronauts, family doctors, there's this whole inclination that, you know, they're money driven. All those professions are not like they want to help people. They want to explore. They want to, you know, discover things that nobody has before. They didn't get into this profession, go get educated and spend all this time to make, X amount of money. They did it to help people. Right.
Yeah.
And it's really been flipped, like, especially online now. You see everyone. Every day I see like these things where like you get a doctor surrounded by 30 people and he says a fact and then they run up and hit a buzzer and each one of them debates it on the fact. Like, everything is being reversed now to where I don't know. I just feel like doctors are defending themselves. Healthcare professionals are defending themselves. And I feel in that way, they're just so underpaid. Mm-hmm. The hours, everything is just, it's out of alignment.
Jillian says you also want the best paid, best talent teaching your kids. Everybody knows the consequences of poor or low budget teaching.
Indoctrination.
She says, speaking of which, teachers convention happening right now in Alberta's capital city, says the session on dealing with volatile situations is packed. She says that's a sign of the times. And Jillian says, I got to go. It's about to start. So Jillian, thanks for joining us while you could.
Just did a school dance out in St. Albert the other week. And it was funny because you've got all these people online talking about teachers and they're indoctrinating the youth. And I went there and I was like, these are the nicest men and women I've ever met in my life at a school dance. Enjoy, and all the kids are coming up and talking to them. And it's just like, I don't know. Again, another section of professionals who service us, who care for our kids, and they're being villainized as well right now.
Yeah. Nia, thanks for your YouTube channel membership, says compare how much a derrick hand or like guys who work on drilling rigs make compared to doctors, and they don't have to carry their own insurance. They don't have to run their own business. That from Nia for sure. And then Marie with the age-old question, well, how much money is a hockey player worth? Yeah, That's a whole other ball game.
No comment.
When is somebody worth $14 million US a year?
Look, we don't want to get into this because it'd be an hour-long conversation, but like, hockey players aren't the problem. You want to talk about go look at baseball, NFL, like those are overpriced. But I think in general, yes, I do think every athlete, professionally in the Big Four is probably overpaid. If aliens came down and looked at our whole economy and were like, these guys that throw the rock in the hole or like hit the thing with the stick make more than all these other people with the big brains, they'd be like,
I'm like, but look at how he throws the rock in the hole.
He does it so well.
And millions of people tune in to watch them throw the rock in the hole. So maybe that's it. Hockey, professional athletes are commodities.
Yeah,
they're commodities in a machine that drives 100%. Revenue.
I was going to say that after I made the joke, like the whole, every league is tied into advertising and the building of stadiums, which, affects cities. It's very complicated stuff. And the players are little chess pieces within that. So it's not just a rock being thrown into a hole, but that's what the aliens will see when they come down. They'll be like, what?
I love you don't say if.
The neurosurgeon makes
when the aliens come down
28 times less than the stick hitter ball guy.
Cherie says in rural Alberta, there's so many men making money hand over fist with no post-secondary education. Says my husband, 7 years of university. He's teaching high school for half the wage. Says it is so skewed, but he loves his job. That from Cherie. I love that. Vamp Fashion says, if you guys are going to question salaries, let's talk about the ridiculous salaries of CEOs and presidents, including big public sector and private companies.
I agree 100%. I agree that like people shouldn't get big payouts and big bonuses like that every year. I hate to say it because it's like, taboo, but I don't think anyone should have, I know you're going to disagree with me, but I don't think anyone should have $9 billion. I just don't.
Why would I disagree?
Because we kind of disagree on this.
If I had $9 billion, I would disagree.
Well, if I had $9 billion, I'd give away 8 right away. Because to spend $1 billion in 40 years, you'd have to spend like 70 grand a day, which is, I don't know. For me, that's too much money. I'm not Floyd Mayweather, though. I'm not like
nobody needs more than $5 million
a day.
5 million is fine.
Well, no, I'm just saying like
richest person in the world could have 5 million and be fine.
I think in terms of actual like money you can access, like $1 billion should be the limit. There's no reason why one person would need more than that much money in a lifetime.
Yeah.
It's impossible to spend. So.
Tara says family docs also spend a lot of time outside the exam room advocating for patients, pushing to get testing, treatments that have long wait times. Tara's absolutely correct. I remember my dad sitting at his desk doing his paperwork after he had seen all of his patients. Ambustion says, let's talk about those big-time wealthy podcasters. Now, that is the real problem, is these overpaid independent podcasters that walk around just splashing cash, totally out of touch with the common person. Anyway.
Yeah.
Aaron says, when I worked at a restaurant, we had a young buck eat $100 bill in front of us. At the time, I was making $8 an hour, and we were so disgusted. He ate $100 bill in front of
I'm trying to queue up my Instagram right now because I have it's probably my most embarrassing photo taken, but I have a bowl full of 50s and 100s from about, I think it was 12 years ago, and I was a little intoxicated, and I'm eating them with a fork. Yeah,
but you didn't swallow them.
I can't. I remember.
You can't remember if you did or did not swallow $50 and $100 bills.
This was late at night, Ryan. I was a lot younger, 12 years ago. I remember the bet was, you can't chew through a bill without holding it with your hands. Like ripping it, you'd have to you can't do it in your mouth. It's physically impossible. And then I started to have a little bowl of shekels.
Yeah. Ambustion says, guys, I hope everybody realizes that was a joke. We obviously realize it was a joke, Ambustion. You're one of our OGs. You're here in the chat all the time. We love you. I'm just having a little fun with it.
If we were rich, we'd be one day a week, guys.
Yeah. Ken K says there are like a few hundred hockey players on earth that make over $1 million a year. There's probably more. Yeah, there's probably like 600-700 that are making over $1 million a year.
I agree. That's
there are
what I
not
said.
many
Look at the
players
other
in the NHL. There's probably just a handful of players that are making less than $1 million. What's the NHL minimum salary right now? It's something like $975, isn't it? So you've got about $775,000 US is the NHL's minimum salary. Not many players making the minimum. About 700 players in the league. Anyway, Ken, I'm not trying to get nerdy, but he makes the point. He says there's a few hundred hockey players making over $1 million a year, whereas there are millions of dipshits who make over that amount.
Whoa.
Also true.
Who we call them dipshits? No, I'm just kidding. But I would say also the reason I said that is I feel like out of the big four, hockey players are underpaid. And I think hockey, I'll say this right now, I've said it before, hockey is the hardest sport to play. It's like, look at every other sport. I believe Brian Burks was talking about this on a podcast like 2 months ago. He's like, look at every other sport where you have control of the ball or whatever, the item you're using to score. You're wearing shoes or cleats or whatever.
Yeah.
NFL, basketball, baseball, soccer. Look at the skill it takes to play hockey. You have to use a stick to use the object. The amount of skating skill you have, you could probably be an Olympic athlete in another skating sport just from the technical
Some of them, for
skating
sure.
involved. And then you add the physical aspect as well. And then underneath all the comments on this podcast with Brian Burke was, hey, athlete here, played football and hockey. Hockey is way more grueling, you know? And underpaid compared to, wait, did we go from doctors underpaid to saying that $1 million athletes are underpaid?
I'm not going to make the hockey players are
I think I
underpaid
took a wrong
argument.
fork
I
here.
don't think they're underpaid, but it's you can make the justification. There's one here that's interesting too. Super Chat Ken says hockey players are entertainers. I have no problem with what they make in a private model. The problem is when taxpayers subsidize arenas. I would also say, just as we didn't plan on spending 10 minutes talking about hockey player salaries today, but I would just say this as well, is that, you say, well, the salary can be based or justified on the revenue that player drives, right? They fill, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid, Evan Bouchard, they fill arenas, they sell jerseys, they drive revenue.
Connected to so many things.
But let's also point out that the reason that the average family can't afford to go to an Oilers game, and the reason that playoff tickets are like $2,000 is because, in part, some of those salaries are so high, and also the owners have very ambitious revenue goals. I mean, it blows my mind.
Of course they do.
The Edmonton Oilers are more profitable than the Los Angeles Lakers.
I know.
Put that
and
in
everything's tied to the players, like you're talking about. Like because more people come to see certain players, they buy more food and beverages. And then what do you see? Like the food and beverages costs go up. Everything's tied to it all. And I do agree that right now, the big teams, especially Rangers, Leafs, Oilers, you go to those barns, man. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's like going to Disney World now.
TC says, OMG, Johnny, the things that some people do when they're drinking.
I'm trying to find it right now. I'm scrolling
Aurora
so fast.
Astra says, eating cash.
To give you a
that is a
picture of
meal
me.
that is too rich for me. And others are saying, this from Matthew, Johnny, can you imagine where those bills had been?
Go look at your Slack. Hit the
my
link.
Gosh, you want me to call this up? I can't believe we're showing this. This is I have not
Disclaimer
seen
right
this
now.
before. I
Children,
feel like
do
I'm-
not put money in your mouth.
I'm learning
You
something
could get
new from you.
cold sores and or the flu.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yeah, kids, don't do what Johnny. Oh, it's just still photo. Okay, yeah, we can show it.
I had a little drink there.
Oh, you had
too.
So you've got a bowl full of 20s and you've got a martini glass full of 50s. Hashtag diet. 656 weeks ago you posted this.
There you go, buddy.
Time flies. On July
Look at that
28th
young
of
buck.
2013. Look at that young
Just
buck.
eating germs.
Just chowing down on the dirtiest. Anyway, what do they say? Clean.
2 weeks later, I spent all that money on a nice physician visit.
Spent it on a private MRI.
I had horrible viruses inside of me.
Hey, friends, we love your engagement with this show. And as we wrap up every single week, courtesy of our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park, you take center stage. These are all real emails to talk@ryanjesperson.com, with one exception. It was a YouTube comment. So if you do comment on a YouTube episode, it's fair game for the Flamethrower, presented by the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. Abby writes in from Calgary, says, Jespo, I'm sorry, this budget is a mess. A $9.4 billion deficit after years of lecturing Albertans about fiscal responsibility. You can't brand yourself as the party of discipline and then blow a hole in the books the minute oil prices wobble. That's not leadership, that's gambling. And freezing contributions to the Heritage Savings Trust Fund, that's the one account that's supposed to protect us from exactly this type of volatility. Instead of saving during uncertain times, we're draining the cushion. When will Alberta ever learn? And don't get me started on fee hikes either. They won't call it a tax increase, fine. But when families are paying more for services while groceries, insurance, mortgages are already crushing them, it feels the same. Abby says record health spending, higher fees, bigger deficit, and somehow we're supposed to believe this is a plan. From where I'm sitting in Calgary, it looks like Alberta's spending like the boom years are back without the boom. That from Abby. What about this one from Robert, who says, I think that people in Alberta, rural Alberta specifically, need to make a decision. Either live in a community that has doctors, nurses, education, and a future, or let mouthy white nationalists run around talking shit and spreading lies. I've been dealing with the arrogance and entitlement from them all my life, and it's time to put an end to it. I'm doing everything I can not to swing on people who I don't really like much to start with, and they're making it harder every single day. Robert, remember, violence is never, okay, violence is rarely the solution. This one from Dawn, who says, about Donald Trump's call to the gold medal winning American men's Olympic hockey team. You know, many people laugh at jokes by such men. Even if they're poor jokes, it's seen as an honor to have a call from the president, even if he's dishonorable. Also, he made a joke about him being impeached again and said they could laugh at that. Maybe not what he said about inviting the women, so I disagree with this public commentary. That from Dawn. Meantime, Janice says, oh, spare me the it's just a joke routine. Spare me the left-wing cucks garbage when POTUS phones the U.S. men's team after the Olympic gold medal final and turns a hard-fought, world-class athletic moment into a political flex. It's not neutral, it's not harmless, and it's definitely not just sports. This isn't about hurt feelings, it's about boundaries. And when critics raise that concern, the response is to sneer, to call people sore losers. That's the real tell. Janice says sports are supposed to model discipline, respect, and humility in victory and defeat. And if young boys and girls are watching this, and they are, I hope they learn to completely, fiercely, and celebrate graciously. I hope they learn that leadership means elevating the moment, not hijacking it. Be better than the cheap shot. Be better than the tribal chant. Win with class, lose with class. That's the lesson. I love that, Janice. And this one from Eddie. Eddie says, and by the way, we'll acknowledge, Eddie, your flamethrower got caught last week because we had to go with a special themed episode, but we hung on to it, pal. We appreciate it. Eddie's really got a bee in his bonnet over what Edmonton City Council's up to right now. He says, Jespo, what I'm seeing on the infill file is a masterclass in duplicity, flat-out deception. During the election, we heard it loud and clear from Andrew Knack, Ashley Salvador, and Michael Jans. They were going to dial it back. 8-unit mid-block developments, too much. They said 6. They campaigned on 6. People voted based on that, and communities trusted that. And then what happens? The second it matters, poof. The commitment disappears. 8 units back on the table like none of it was ever said. No accountability, no explanation that holds water, just a shrug and a vote. That is not leadership. That is saying whatever it takes to get elected and then doing whatever you want once you're in. He says this looks to me early in its inception like a council that says one thing, does another, and expects Edmontonians to just take it, and I, for one, will not forget this. That from Eddie in an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. That's where you can submit your flamethrower 24/7. Final episode of the week, we proudly present it in partnership with our friends at the DQs of Northwest Edmonton and Sherwood Park. And Johnny, while we're talking about the DQ in Sherwood Park in particular, let's give a big shout out to that DQ on Baseline Road. They've just taken a trophy, the 12th year in a row, winning the top soft serve for DQ in Canada. The 12th year in a row, the top soft serve for DQ in Canada. That is unbelievable. A big shout out to Michael Lieber and the team at the DQ in Sherwood Park on Baseline Road. Michael wants us to remind you that coming up on April 7th, and we'll remind you again ahead of the date, it is Ben Stelter Day at that DQ. You buy a medium Oreo Blizzard. That was Ben's favorite. And 100% of the Blizzard sales, not the proceeds, not the profits, 100% of the sales is going to go to the Ben Stelter Foundation. That's coming up April 7th. We'll remind you again before then. These are the DQs in Palisades, Nemeo, Newcastle, Westmount, and Baseline Road that bring you the Flamethrower every single Friday here on Real Talk. Make sure when you pop in for a Flamethrower signature stack burger and an Oreo Blizzard, you let them know that Jespo sent you. We're back at it Monday. We hope you have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy Heartbeat Hideaway at Atrium tonight in support of the Royal Alexandra Hospital's CK Huey Heart Center. And be kind to one another. We love you guys.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton.